Hey everybody, my name is Zachary Evans, and I wanted to start off with a few photos of myself. So I will be presenting on disaster management in France. So to begin with, I wanted to give you guys a few photos just to see some of the touristy things that a lot of people think of when they think about France. So the history of disaster management in France is really interesting. France is a country with a ton of history that we all know about, and a majority of their disasters are climate based, although they've recently dealt with a surging number of terrorism and humanitarian disasters. France used to handle most of the disaster response and prevention strategies on their own, but now that they're such a major power in the European Union, they're at the forefront of hazard risk management for the region. France's emergency management system is based on the notion that emergency management effectiveness needs the appraisal of social, economic, and environmental risk acceptability by the public. So their implementation pattern is kind of hard to talk about, but I'm going to describe it as a sort of confused approach because the national government sets and approves plans for potential disasters that the country may face as a whole, but at the same time, local governments and regional authorities are partly responsible for themselves. So this is all done through what is called a major risks prevention plan. I'm not going to try to say it in French, you guys can read that, but the PPR, which is what the acronym is, covers all types of natural hazards, including avalanches, storms, forest fires, floods, landslides, earthquakes, etc. This plan is meant to be flexible and is adaptable to the needs of local, communal, and river basin authorities. So local areas are required to create and have their individual PPRs prepared according to the specifics of their region and then approved by the national government to make sure that they are effective. So this strategy is unique because it allows for federal coordination and ensures that the country is prepared across all the regions for disasters, while also giving local areas and authorities the ability to create plans for themselves. So this helps local areas respond to disasters immediately and then request for national help if the need arises. So here's a couple of the famous rivers in France that I'll be talking about when it comes to specific disasters and planning. So France primarily deals with floods, droughts, forest fires, and landslides each year. Floods are the most frequent occurring disaster in France, as their huge number of rivers in the country make it very prone to flooding during heavy rainfall and storms. For example, the Seine and Loue rivers have combined to flood 5 times in the last 12 years. Different regions of France face different disasters depending on their location and climate. For example, southwestern and northwestern France deals with flooding and storms, whereas southeastern France deals with forest fires and earthquakes. As a result, that's how these PPRs come into play because they ensure that areas that are low-lying on the riverbanks in central, northwestern, and southwestern France are prepared for floods and can respond quickly. So here's a couple of photos of recent flooding that have taken place due to storms, and you can see that it's quite extensive. So there are several participants in disaster management in France. The primary participant is the governmental agencies. They're responsible for the coordination, for the response, for the recovery. They help kind of set the whole tone and get everybody moving when disasters occur. In addition to this, there's involvement from NGOs and international organizations when extra help is needed for recovery or for construction. France has been known to welcome in international organizations when help is needed, which is shown in Storm Lothar in 1999, when wind and rain caused billions of dollars worth of destruction, and France needed help with rebuilding and recovery. France's military is another participant in the disaster management process, as the military can be deployed during serious cases to aid in the recovery process. In October 2020, this was seen when troops were deployed to help with flood relief efforts in Nice when French citizens were missing and rescue searches needed to be conducted. So there's a few obstacles to effective disaster management with this process. Obviously, regional planning is necessary because of how diverse their environment is, but with that much planning and coordination needed, you can definitely get bureaucratic issues with coordination, with it taking too long, with approval without necessarily too much forethought. France also has to budget for a ton of disasters that may occur, and they have to predict what the biggest areas are to focus on, which can be a problem. And in addition to this, you risk putting too much trust into local areas because trusting people to be financially and morally responsible at all times can be kind of controversial if it doesn't go well. So effects of disasters on management planning and policy today. Since the medieval age, they've had a ton of disasters. Formal disaster management planning did not really take place until the 1970s when it was clear that the old system wasn't working. Between 1974 and 99, over 50% of France suffered from a natural disaster. In addition to this, disasters caused an estimated $19 billion in damages, while the government only budgeted for $5 million. This caused the French government to change their strategy from national preparation to the current plan. In addition to this, during the 1980s, France saw over 70% of their population was vulnerable to disasters under the old plans. This caused the government to require more local coordination. They had to educate the populace about disasters that they were likely to face and provide shelters and assistance during disasters. And this is kind of the transition to the modern system that they use now. So here are my references, and yeah, so thank you all for listening to my introduction on disaster management in France. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments.